Okay, so we're officially in February, and as everyone I'm sure is aware, is the month of love. And I think from the time we were little kids, we start participating in things like Valentines, where we start, you know, becoming involved with this idea of romance. And I think we're all aware of the Disney movies and the fairy tales that talk about love stories and finding the one and being with someone else and then happily ever after. And I think it creates a bit of problems when we start growing up and realizing that the world is not so straightforward and that people are not so simple and that it's not that easy or fluffy. So yeah, I think that it's, this is a good time to sit down and have really honest conversations about the difficulties and the somewhat negative aspects of coming into a landscape where everyone loves to celebrate love and loves to celebrate, finding the one, but without discussing how complicated the territory is. And it makes, I think, a particularly tricky environment for young girls, where there's lots of expectations about romance being a validating thing in your life, having a boyfriend being a validating thing in your life. And it's a lot of expectations and standards that are very heteronormative, that are very hypocritical, a lot of double standards. And I think once we start having open conversations about problematic things, about all the roses and red flags that we come across in our teenage years, we can start to help each other out of unnecessarily negative, emotionally traumatic, experiences. So I know you guys, we have a really good set of questions submitted from you guys, but I thought I would start by like a primer question, which is just like, at what age did you start feeling as though romance or needing to be with someone else was a thing in your life? Or like at what age did that start to feel like part of your reality? And like, how did that make you feel? So open mic, open floor, whoever wants to go.
I think probably like when I start watching Disney movies, all these Disney princesses and princes, and like how cute it was. Yeah, I think that's when I wanted a relationship.
So real young, basically.
For me, I think class 3 in primary school, like, when hormones and start, or do hormones even start at that age? Like when you start, seeing boys and they're older, you start, but I didn't have the whole Disney fantasy. I was a tomboy, unfortunately. Yeah.
Sorry, you go ahead.
Okay, I think that for me, I always knew that I liked guys from very young, but I think like when I actually started actually wanting a relationship, it was honestly probably like pretty late. It was probably like 4th form when I started to realize like, hey, that seems interesting, I think that's like the point where I started to actually like kind of take it seriously.
Funny, because I was literally about to say the same thing. I think 4th form was when I got into the idea, but since then it's honestly been an on and off thing. Like one year I'm like, yeah, I totally want it, and that's when I'm like, ugh, no, I'm too tired of that. But I think it started 4th form.
Off and on. Kaya, what did you want to say?
I feel like for me, the Disney fantasy was there when I was young, for sure, of like dreaming of having a relationship. But I feel like it seriously hit like when I hit secondary school, probably.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the same as Kaya. I think definitely when I was young, it was the kind of Disney fantasizing kind of thing, but it was more of a serious thing, I think, secondary school. And I think just being exposed to older guys and like seeing that whole thing is like, okay, like this is a more real thing than like, the Disney version. So.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess secondary school is definitely where you come into contact, I guess, with like just guys on a regular basis and guys from different ages. And I think because you're in an environment where you're with guys who are older, the guys who are your age start to like want to act older, and then, you know, flirting starts becoming a thing, you know. And so I guess, you know, starting to get into the questions that, you know, you guys were asking. And I think like you don't need to have been in a relationship to have something relevant to say. It's not like you need a card that says I had a boyfriend to have a relevant opinion, you know. So yeah, the first question, you know, so do people take, and when I say people, I mean like I guess the public, grown-ups, teachers, do they take teen relationships seriously? And from there, does that contribute to when instances of emotional, physical, or verbal abuse take place? How do people take that? Do they take that seriously? Do they sort of brush it off? How would you say teen relationships are in relation to the rest of the world?
I would say teen relationships aren't taken seriously until they're like being sexually active. I think just like, you know, a little fling, a little boyfriend, it lasts a week, maybe 2 weeks, a month at most. You know, discovering life. But when it comes like you're sexually active, it's like we gotta put a stop to this, or we gotta like, you know, look at things differently. Yes, puppy love, yes.
I think
Yeah. Go ahead, Ella. Go ahead.
I was saying that when we were like talking about the roses and red flags, this was one of the things that immediately pops up, because I think sorry, that's my brother crying in the background. But I think that's one of the things that is just kind of very obvious. And then you also think about it, like I think a lot of people, when they talk about relationship abuse, it's like, well, you know, a teenage boy isn't able to do that to you as a teenage boy. And so it's not taken very light. I mean, it's taken very lightly, and people don't understand the actual consequences of it because of this idea that a teenage relationship isn't that important.
I definitely agree with Ella, because even on the topic of the abuse specifically, I feel like when we think of abuse from a partner, it's always in the more domestic violence cases, adults who are married and living together, and that kind of relationship is more validated, and then the abuse is more taken seriously. But we think, you know, with teenagers, obviously you're not living together, you're seeing each other at school or when you go out or whatever, and it's like there can't be any substantial amount of abuse, you know, happening in these circumstances, so it's kind of overlooked.
Yeah, I think that definitely in teenage relationships, a lot of the time there's a lot of like gaslighting. And the thing is that it really should be taken more seriously than it is, because I feel like as teenagers, like especially if it's like your first relationship, you're more likely to try to make it work. Like adults don't take it seriously. Other teenagers are like pressuring you to stay in this relationship because it's like cool to be dating someone. But the fact is that you're so much more vulnerable because this is the first person giving you that kind of validation. So like it would be much harder for you to like realize that this is unnormal if this is like the first time that you're experiencing something like this.
I feel like maturity has a lot to do with it as well. Like regardless of how mature you claim you are, like you still have a lot of maturing to do as a teenager, and you won't realize that until you're older. So I feel like the media plays a role in it too, because I know that it's really trendy to be toxic, and toxicity in relationships is seen as cute and stuff like that, but it's really not. And people overlook it because of how cool it may seem, or because it's trending, but it's actually pretty bad and pretty damaging to someone.
Yeah, especially like, you know, like it was mentioned, it's one of the first, you know, encounters you have with like meaningful relationships outside of your family or friends. And it can make a really big impact on how you have relationships in the future. If, you know, if you have a toxic relationship, you can get some serious trust issues, or it can set a very low standard where, you know, the people you're with throughout your life just are at a low standard, you know, and yeah, I think it's interesting what you brought up, Kaya, is a good segue into the other question, which are like, how do you pick up signs of toxicity possibly before a relationship? And I guess like to start with, like, how would you guys even define toxicity? Because it could be, like you said, it's something that can be kind of glamorized. But like how, like what is toxicity? In, I guess it can be in a relationship, a romantic relationship, or in general. Hi, Micah. Welcome to the conversation. So yeah, no wrong answers here, by the way.
Okay, I think I'm like having such a hard time defining what toxicity is, because in my head it's so many different things. Because it's like if somebody's constantly making you feel like you're stupid or you're doing something wrong or you're the problem, even when in your head and in reality you're doing something that's quite normal, and someone's trying to make you feel small and literally gaslight you, I think that plays into toxicity a lot. But it's so many other things. Anything can become toxic once it's with the right person or the wrong person, I should say.
Yeah, I guess like some examples for me that stand out a lot would be like not encouraging you to pursue your own interests, like making you feel like a bad person if you don't spend all the time that you have with them, or making you feel like you can't have any friends of like the opposite sex around you, well, depending on what your orientation is, but it making you feel that you can't speak to anybody that you could potentially like because they feel uncomfortable. I guess calling you names, of course, hitting you, pressuring you to do things that you don't want to. I mean, like there's so, like Matt said, there's so many other things, but those are the things that I think that I've seen a lot.
Yeah, I think ego plays a big role with toxicity. I think when people start projecting things onto you and, like you said, like manipulating you because of jealousy, and that has a lot to do with their own insecurities, and where like you as a partner become like an extension of their kind of ego. And I think that is a big, kind of foundational part of toxic behaviors. And yeah, the media really encourages a lot of egoism and a lot of, I think a prioritization of one's own ego instead of like compassion for, your partner as their own person. And yeah, so I guess going from there, kind of having this understanding, like what would you say, and this, it could be off of experience, off of observations, off of, your own thoughts, what are signs that a relationship is becoming toxic? Or how would you identify toxicity before entering into a relationship?
I don't know if someone else was going, sorry, I didn't see, but I feel like when you're experiencing something and then when you actually verbalize it to someone, it's completely different. And I feel like, especially for me and like also my friends as well, when you verbalize something that someone's doing to you or saying to you, that you're like questioning, well, is this bad or whatever, when you actually say it out loud and realize how bad it sounds, it's completely different than you experiencing it. So I feel like that's when you can actually pick up on, oh, this is actually a problem. Like maybe I shouldn't pursue this person, or maybe I shouldn't continue this with this person. So I feel like actually saying out loud what's happening to you, or having someone you trust or whatever listen to what you're saying, that's really important. And that's helped me a lot.
I feel like I completely agree with you, Kaya. Like, especially if you're ever like feeling like you're talking to this person and they have you on eggshells all the time, like you are like just constantly watching what you're saying or you're doing, or like you have to literally analyze everything that they're doing just to see if something's wrong. That's definitely like a big red flag.
I feel like another one. I think another one is if you behave different around your friends than you used to before. Because I used to find some friends that I had when they get in relationships that I seen as toxic. Their behaviors changed when they get around their friends. Yeah.
Yeah, I was literally going to say something very similar to that. I was just going to say when you have to limit yourself or change your behavior to suit what they want and not necessarily what you want, I think that's when it's completely going off the wrong path. Because in my opinion, you shouldn't have to change yourself to be a version of yourself that somebody else wants. Because then you're not living for yourself at that point, and it's just going to take you down a completely wrong path.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I think, that the role of communication with people, people outside of the relationship, your friends, close family members, whoever you might trust, and people who know you and who know how you are, normally, it's so important to maintain communication, because I think one of the first kind of steps in manipulation is isolation. I think when someone wants you all to themselves, that's I think a pretty big red flag as well, because that allows them to then kind of, I think, over influence your understanding of the situation. Whereas if you maintain strong relationships with your friends, or even your, your guy friends, or, whatever, that helps you to maintain a kind of, more well-rounded perception of the scenario. Would anyone have any other, sort of experiences or observations to add?
I guess I would say when somebody doesn't, take time to learn your love language, because they're 5 of them, right? And if they're getting it wrong, or you got, hint at, what you like, what you expect, and they still can't correct or change their behaviors, then that's a huge red flag.
That's interesting. I think that's such a big difference with, I think, the generation of young people nowadays versus, I guess, when I was a teenager. So many genuine sort of I guess therapeutic or research on relationships is now so broadly available on things like Instagram. When I was growing up, if you said love language, we'd be like, what are you speaking about? What is said language? Are you talking about the Valentine's Day request song day or something? Because that's my love language. You have $2. So this identifying love languages, the fact that that's a broadly understood thing is such a big step, I think, in the right direction. Knowing what that is and the role it plays in your relationship. And yeah, definitely to highlight what you're saying, Jamila. I think if someone is uninterested in meeting you where you need to be met, and they're just interested in their own, how they feel or what they're getting out of the relationship, then it's clearly a relationship that's for them and not for, for both people involved. So yeah, I mean, would you guys say that how would you guys, say, based off of having this information more widely available, would you say it is difficult to leave a relationship nowadays, especially in the secondary school setting where people know that you're together and then may have thoughts about you guys not being together? Kaya?
I feel as Haley said, that's your most relationships when you're in secondary school, especially, are your first relationship, and you crave a lot of validation from the person. So it's I won't say the end of the world, but it's oh my gosh, this person that I'm basically with 24/7, or I talk to all the time, I understand that it might be toxic, or I understand that it might be bad, but I really can't see a life without that person. But it's really not, I don't want to say it's not that big of a deal, but it's not as big as it seems, but it's still really difficult to let go of that first solid relationship that you had. Well, solid, but yeah.
I also think that once it's your first relationship, you don't really know what other people have to offer. So, this is your first experience, and not many people might know, well, this is bad, or especially with love or relationships, people aren't that open about it. And so it's hard to talk to other people about, being in a toxic relationship. And so if you don't know, that you can experience better, a lot of people are just going to hold on to that and think that they have the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think especially it can get confusing when someone might notice that you want to leave the relationship and then do like the love bombing thing where like they'll just change, like switch it up real quick and like, make it feel as though, they're over that behavior, or, I think that can make it quite tricky. And I mean, I think it's also important to acknowledge that, being young and, it might also be the other person's first relationship, like it also might just require communication. Like you don't want to jump the gun on something being toxic because it's not working out. Like maybe it is something that does require saying like, what you're doing makes me feel uncomfortable in this aspect, or I think that you're, smothering me a bit and I feel like isolated from my friends. And I think we're not really like, we don't romanticize having those sort of conversations because you just want it to work. You just want the chemistry to be perfect, like without saying anything. But yeah, I think maybe like there should be more, I think, of a normalization of that kind of, less glamorous conversation of working out problems and negotiating before leaving a relationship. Like, I think there's also a lot of like glamorization of the drama of like leaving someone, or you know what I mean?
I think that dramatization, like, causes not dramatize, glamorization. Look at me mixing up my words, but it makes more people like feel like this is fun, like as emotionally taxing as it is. People, when they like see all of these things, or like are constantly told that, oh well, like every relationship is gonna have a problem, and like if y'all aren't fighting, he isn't the one, all sorts of things like that. Like it makes you think that you start to be like, okay, so what is the point where I give up then? Like, how do I know when I'm supposed to stop fighting and just like leave? And a lot of the time people are just like, well, if you just try one more time, everything will be fine. And people end up stuck there forever.
Destiny?
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say this is like where gaslighting will come in my head. Like the other partner would like try to gaslight you into feeling like you did nothing wrong. Sorry, that he or she did nothing wrong. Like so that's what you were saying it where they were like they will love bomb you. So I was thinking, oh, this is where like the gaslighting will come into play and how they would like try to make you feel like you're the problem in the relationship, even though you may be trying to do your best, but this is where like they would make you feel bad, right?
Yeah, no, and I think the thing about like it getting dragged out is that you just waste so much time and like mental, emotional energy on these sort of things. Like just thinking back to like what I like when I was in secondary school, and it felt like, it's funny because it feels like a big deal at the time, like you were saying, like it's really in the long run it's not, but because your world and that in this moment consists of that relationship and consists of going to see, in my case it's the same school every day or whatever, it just feels very difficult to exit. And I think because like the media and like sort of validation you get from it makes it seem like you should prioritize this, I feel like you miss out on a lot of other areas of life that you could be investing in. Like I frankly wish that I called it out when I did, that I left a lot earlier, and that I just like studied or like went out with friends or got a hobby, you know what I mean? But that wasn't really a thing back then. And there also wasn't the same, I guess, kind of communities that you find on platforms like Instagram, which are like, that do celebrate a bit more like the self-love or this, the sort of your journeys with yourself as something as valid as your journeys with other people. So I think, yeah, definitely something interesting is happening with social media, and it's not all negative and it's not all positive. It's a bit of like a lot of negative and positive happening on social media at the same time. So it's almost like you need like crash course on how to navigate those sorts of platforms. And yeah, I guess that could segue into, I mean, does anyone have anything else to add in that area?
I guess I would add that not only is it social media, I guess because like it sometimes in the households as well, because you know everything starts from home. Like a lot of these children and whatnot, they will see a lot of struggle relationships with their parents or grow up in broken homes, so they really don't know love. So they do seek it out in the, those outlets, and they wouldn't know any better because okay, they've seen this at home, so I guess this in my relationship is normal, and I will stick with that. So that could be a an issue as well.
Definitely, and that's why I think like the schools are really a site of like of experiencing life outside of the home, and so schools are where all these resources should be available, like in the form of talks, in the form of workshops, in the form of student organized activities. Like there should definitely be more emphasis put on making these sorts of things available in the schools, since that's where there's the main place of like life happening outside of homes for kids. And also because not everyone would have access, I guess, to internet all the time or like social media all the time as well. But with the prevalence of, phones and social media and WhatsApp being like massive nowadays, like more than when I was in secondary school as well. Like the things I hear from my sister that happen on like Snapchat, like never fail to astound me. So I guess the topic I want to bring up is the normalization of asking for and even like just expecting nudes from someone that you're chatting with, like not even like a committed partner, but just you're dealing, you're talking, and then this topic of nudes comes up. Like how do we navigate this, and why, and what do we do in these circumstances?
Okay. I feel like, well, we all know that this is a really tough topic to speak about specifically, because it's like every few months there's some exposed night or somebody getting exposed, and it's like, for me, it's really triggering just because it's like, I don't understand why people like constantly leak news, but at the same time, like, because social media is so powerful and all of that, and the same thing about seeking validation and stuff like that. Some people just feel a need to do it just because they feel like, oh, this is a way that I'm satisfying my partner, the only way that I really can right now. So it's like, and I feel like part of it comes from manipulation as well, especially for older guys with younger girls. It could be older girls with younger guys. It really doesn't matter, to be honest. But I feel like a manipulation plays a lot into it, because I know some girls that don't really want to do it, but just do it because of the validation from their partner or seeking to please them. But I feel like it's a really funny topic to speak on, because it's just so much goes on around it.
I think this is one area that I just see a lot of like sexism, like all of the double standards that we think that we've gotten over, they just come out. Like a few months ago, I'm sure like almost all of y'all, I ain't calling any names, but I'm sure that almost all of you will like know what I'm speaking about. Like some guy was like going in people's phones and taking out their nudes and sending them to himself, and now all of the people who canceled him for like 2 months are hanging out with him again. And it's like, those girls haven't gotten over that, And I know that there are girls whose nudes have been leaked, and the guy still has all of his friends, and there are girls that still talk to him now, but she has not like regained her reputation after that. Even though that it wasn't like she put them out. Even if she did, it's whatever. But like, it's not like she put them out there herself. This was supposed to be something private that she was sharing with one person, and he couldn't be trusted. So I just feel like there's some serious double standards, and I hate to hear it, because I know that I've seen personally like guys come up to me, oh, you want to see my collection? And I'm just like, why would you think that that is okay? And I'm sure that Kaya know who I'm talking about when I say a collection. But yeah, it's ridiculous.
Kaya?
Like, I feel like a lot of people leak people's news like when they break up or if something happens between them as revenge porn. And I just feel like in no circumstance is leaking someone's news, either male, female, whatever, justifiable at all. I really don't think it is. And whenever it happens, I'm just like, why would you even do that? Like, I feel like if you break up with someone, if you stop talking to someone, even if you're talking to someone, why would you constantly claim or show something that was supposed to be intimate for someone? Like, I just think that's really messed up. So yeah.
Yeah, basically going off what Haley said, I know for sure about the collections and all those different passcodes they have on their phones and different apps they have to keep all these different girls. Some girls they don't even know. Some girls who are way too young for them to be having their nudes in their phone, locked up, stored away. And it just, what gets me the most is how proud they are to have them. Like it creeps me out because it's like, if somebody did that to them, they know they would feel a sort of way about it. Exactly, Kaya. So I don't know where that whole thing came from because it is very weird and it's creepy. But in terms of like how to navigate the situation, because most boys it's gonna come up. I just all right, like I change the topic, change the conversation, or I'm just like, well, I'm not like I'm not comfortable with that, especially when I know the kind of person they are. Because if the situation were to happen, I know tomorrow that would be, the hot news on Snapchat or whatever. So I just try to let them know from the beginning that that's not gonna happen.
Destiny?
Hi, yeah. With regards to the girls like being proud, there was recently a situation, I'm not sure if y'all know, where this girl, she's underage by the way, but she leaked her own nudes and then she allowed everyone to make it seem that the boy was who leaked them. So she let everyone blame him, but really and truly, she was the person who put her news out for the world, and like she was happy about it. And I don't know, man. I got them. I had to delete them. I was like, I don't want those. That's another thing too. People just like circulate, like if it's nothing, the news. Like I didn't ask. Those send it to me. And then also, when you're talking to someone on Snapchat, y'all would know. Like you just see a message and you want to be friendly, so you're like, hey. They're like, hi, like, hey, how you? And they start off like a normal conversation. But then just so the conversation is turned left, and then you just see like a snap come through, you open it, and you near drop your phone because you think I didn't ask you to send me this, but you're still sending it. So I I don't know what to do, but I just leave it undelivered after that. Usually but yeah, they just usually just send it, and so yeah.
Kaya?
I feel like aside from the fact that it's literally a crime to hold child pornography, like when people send me stuff like that, I'm like, I literally like it's not meant for me. Like, do not send that to me. I literally delete it as soon as I get it because it's not meant for me, and I just feel bad. And I feel like in terms of that situation with that happened recently, I feel like a lot of guidance is needed, especially for younger girls, because they feel like they need to do that or sexualize themselves. And I'm all for empowerment, but at some stage there's a fine line between empowerment and extreme sexualization of younger girls. And I don't know if that's what she thinks empowerment is, but I feel like you should still be able to enjoy you being young and you being vulnerable. So you turn into being so sexual. And I feel like she just needs some guidance in that case. Like, yeah, I wanna say that I wanna crucify her about it, but I just feel like she needs some guidance, and that's all she really needs.
Yeah, and it's like, I think it's an interesting point to be brought up, the act of circulating, because there's the person who releases it, but then there's all the other people involved in the circulation of it. So it's clearly just a deeply systemic problem with attitudes. And the fact that I think it's virtual makes things very strange, because for instance, if a man walks up to you somewhere and pulls his pants down, he's going to get arrested, and I don't really see the difference between that and then an unsolicited picture, But okay, let's go Makaria and then Imani and then Haley and then Caitlin.
I was just gonna go off because I kind of mentioned the fact that, you know, having those underage pictures are a crime. I just wanted to go off this one instance where this guy, I was on the phone with this guy and he got those like sent in one of his group chats or whatever. And I just remember how funny he thought it was. And he was like sending, I'm like, stop with that. Like, I don't want, as Kai said, I don't want that on my phone. And he's like, oh no, I'm not deleting that. It's funny. Like, just like, and I'm like, it is bizarre to me because it's so normal for him to have these kind of videos on his phone. And it's like, for these people, and it's a whole big group chat. It's not just like him and his friend who are sending it. It's a whole group chat, maybe 30 plus people. And it's just them sending all these underage people doing things that underage people should not be doing. And it's like, they're not going to remember to delete these things when they are old enough to get arrested for them. So it's just, they're making problems for themselves from the jump. So, yeah.
Imani?
I just think the culture around it as a whole, especially in relation to young girls sending them, I think the entire thing is first just bizarre, really. I think guys' mindset about nudes and the way it's almost like a currency of, you know, I'm so whatever, I have all these nudes in my phone and the collections and that whole thing. I think they're, however they view it and whatever they think if is inflating their masculinity or, you know, their opinions about themselves, it's just so dangerous because I think at every stage in, you know, relationships and stuff, especially with the being your first relationship in young girls, it's just used as a vessel to manipulate girls at every point. You know, you get into a relationship, you want to satisfy the partner, and they use that as, oh, just send it. You get manipulated to do something you're not comfortable with. You get out of the relationship, and then it's hanging over your head. It can, the revenge porn thing. I think it's just such a dangerous cycle of giving them them just taking so much power over you, and you know, then the victim blaming, and it's just such a huge destructive cycle. And I don't know what can be done to stop it. Yeah, that thing, the amount of, it's just such a vessel for so much manipulation at all of these different stages, and I don't really know what we can do to stop it, because I think it's, like you said, very systemic. It's preying on young girls who don't know any better and want that validation. And I think Kaya mentioned it earlier, the encouragement of girls over-sexualizing themselves and that being veiled under reclaiming your power and stuff, but people kind of not realizing how it's still feeding in inherently to benefit the men. You over-sexualizing yourself at such a young age when, you know, there's nothing to gain from it at that stage in your life, and you're not developed enough to make that decision and truly understand the consequences of that. It's still just playing right back into their hands of them having power over you, but manipulating you into feeling like you're more powerful for doing it. So it's just such a manipulation tactic, and it's so dangerous. And I think we've all just seen it, how destructive it is all the time. And I don't know, I just think it's insane, the culture around it and the way they go about nudes and sending them and sharing them, leaking them, that entire thing.
Yeah, and I think the word you use, currency, is a really interesting way to put it, because I think that helps to understand why it's so prevalent. Like, to think of it as a currency of, like, going back to like the ego and stuff. I think in terms of how do we deal with it, I think switching up the narrative to be like, no, this is creepy and you're weird for getting involved with this, you know, like, I think it has to do with switching how in general people respond to this sort of thing. I'm like, people gotta be shamed for that sort of stuff publicly, you know. Haley, what did you wanna say?
I was just gonna say that I realized that a lot of the time too, like, people are always trying to get the innocent girl, and it is very, very weird. It is very creepy. Like, I don't know, there's a certain sort of like power in the male community. Like, if you take girls' virginity or anything like that, it is just very creepy. And I know, like, I had my first boyfriend at 15. Never like kissed anyone, was never in a relationship of any sort before that. So like, I would, like, guys would always come to me on very creepy things, and like, I was never like that kind of person. I wasn't really like speaking to people like that. So I know, like, guys sending me porn just like out of the blue, And it's just like, why would you do that? Like Imani was saying, it's just very weird, the culture surrounding it. And I feel like a lot of people are like pressured into making them like themselves feel like that's like confidence. Like if you are like out all, if you can like talk to all of these guys, and if you're out, like it's like power. And I mean, I guess I get it to an extent, but it becomes very harmful when you're teaching young girls that the only way they have power is through controlling men or controlling their sexuality, stuff that they shouldn't even be involved in yet. It's very disturbing because there's so many more things that women have to offer, but you will realize that a lot of people don't take them seriously until they're just like, oh, like she grown, oh, she looks mature now, she dresses a certain way, she speaks to people a certain way. And it's like, it has nothing to do with what is going on like in your heart or anything like that, like any of your ambitions or goals. It is very much sexuality based, and it's very, very creepy.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think it is difficult where there's all these ambiguities about what empowerment looks like, and the fact that like I've taught a class of first formers before for the Dance4Life programming about social media, and they were telling me that they've been on Instagram since they were like 8, you know. And so I think that's really like, you know, I think signals, you know, like how, you know, you know, how vulnerable they are when they start to get exposed to these ideas of empowerment and desirability and whatnot. So I think Caitlin and then Destiny.
Right, so I was saying, I think we need to talk more to young people about how being overly sexual or like desexualization isn't like the basis of a relationship. So they feel like that's why they send the news, or that's why they're asking the news, because you're looking at everybody at face value rather than their personality, like real things that make a relationship. So they be like, when you see somebody, be like, I feel like boys just look at the person body type wise and stuff first, like, oh, she got a big boxy or this and that. And that's where you get the over sexualization. And that's why a lot of people or boys or whatever like to ask for news or like to send them out, because that's the only thing you're looking at. There's this over sexualization. And I think that boys, like, it's seen as cool when boys talk to multiple girls or whatever, and when they don't, it's seen as weird. But if girls talk to multiple boys, you're seen as like a whore or whatever. And yeah, and when you don't, you're seen as pure or whatever.
Yeah, blatant hypocrisy. And Destiny.
Hi, yeah, I would say I could be wrong, but I've never really seen or heard of male nudes being like circulated as much as I've heard about the female nudes getting circulated. Like, I don't know why, but I just want to make that point.
Well, I feel like, and again, I'm sure everyone could understands like what I'm talking about, where like a male nude typically doesn't feature the face. So it could be, it's just a body part, right? And it could be any body part, you know? Whereas typically, you know, like you were saying, like girls like will take a picture and they'll want to emphasize that it's her big bossy or her big, you know. And I feel like with the way people understand female nudes, it is your whole self, right? Whereas I guess with guys, it's more anonymous. And I mean, it could be like, you know, I've seen posts online where I think it was an interesting approach and a good effort about like how to take safe nudes, where like maybe you are in a partnership where you feel like you want to, like, you do feel comfortable taking a nude, maybe, or you want to. But it was like saying like how to do it safely. So like not showing your face, not being in like an identifiable area, like, or using, you know, like not showing any like birthmarks or something like this. So like, I don't know, it's an interesting maybe approach to saying like, if you're going to do it, like, here's how you do it safely, like with any sort of sexual relationship practice. Yeah. And I feel like people, because more value is put on purity for women, I think when they do like expose themselves, people feel like more, not scandalized, but, more interested in creating like a spectacle about it than with a guy, because he's just being like, a guy who wants to, I think it's that it speaks to that same double standard there. So yeah, it's definitely like an urgent area that needs to be addressed. I think legally, within our social attitudes, within social media, really switching up the attitudes towards it, and pointing out how ridiculous that these things are normalized online. Whereas like if you're in school and like some guy drops his pants down, like he's gonna look like a fool, so sort of like treating it the same way, and I think it's sort of an interesting segue, I think, to go into the topic of sex itself. And I think it's an interesting point that part of the nudes conversation is this ambiguous use of empowerment and sexualization. And when it comes to actually having sex with a partner, like how do you know that you actually do feel ready for this and you want to do it and you're comfortable? Or are you being pressured, or you feel like you need to do it to become an adult, or you feel like you need to do it to prove your partner something or to keep your partner around? Like how do you guys, or not you guys, but how do you work through this? Kaya?
I think what you said about you feeling that you have to prove something to your partner about like the stability or how serious you are in a relationship, which is a part of it being toxic, because you shouldn't be manipulated into doing something that you truly do not want to do. But yeah, I feel like that's expected in a lot of relationships. Like sex is the final and kind of main factor that makes it like, oh yeah, we're actually like serious, we're actually having sex and stuff like that. And it seeps a lot, like people don't take relationships seriously unless there's some sort of sexual aspect in it. So I feel like that's really, really normalized.
Micah or Mike?
Yeah, basically what Kaya said, it is perceived as a rite of passage in some areas, like, and people normalize it as something that you have to do to prove your worth. If I have to do that to prove something to you, as far as I'm concerned, I could leave right then and there. Like, so you don't. It's controversial in a sense because people say like, it's a rite of passage, but on the other hand, it's natural. So you can't. It's mainly a matter of how you were like raised and your common sense. Because like, if you're going around saying, "Oh, I have to do this to become a man," it's like, bruh, no, you can do it. Like how you said, it's up to your own consent. Like if both y'all are comfortable with it and it's just that and nothing more, it's cool. But if it's like something that has to be thought about, if I don't do it good, and a man is still a boy, he's 18, but yeah, it's boy and all sorts of stuff like that, you have to focus on it in here first before you can actually ask your partner if it's something that they want to do. So it's more internal first, then you can actually put it into actions in a sense.
Does anyone have any other? Right, yeah, Haley, go ahead.
I was just saying that I like what Micah said about it, like being like stepping stones, basically like a rite of passage. When like people don't really talk about emotional maturity and like what it takes before you do something like that, or what it takes to like have a strong foundation for a relationship. People tend to like have sex, worry about that after. And I think that that's what causes a lot of problems. I think it's like a lot of outside pressure to, like, from the second that you get in a relationship or you're talking to anybody, like people aren't gonna ask y'all like, oh, like how do you feel about each other? No, like they're asking, oh, y'all do anything yet? So it's like I guess everyone is like hormones raging sort of thing. It's like the expectation, and it creates a lot of unnecessary pressure for people to feel like my kind of said, like, my relationship isn't valid until I do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting in the context of somewhere like Barbados, where we're quite socially conservative, and I think a lot of the time, like in our schools and in general attitudes, especially like you know, adults would like to think that like abstinence is the way, and like we will just be very, you know, I think, yeah, very closed. Like, you know, we don't have, I mean, besides for maybe the Dance4Life programming, where we literally go in there with a purpose to talk about this sort of thing. I think outside of that, there's not a lot of normalization of talking about like things like consent, things about like how, you know, how to do this safely, like demystifying, like, you know, things about practicing safe sex. But yeah, it goes on a lot. Like it's very normalized and from a very young age. And so it kind of creates like this like double, like a, you know, like two realities at the same time, where we want to be really conservative about sex as a society, but there's a lot of sex going on. And so like we don't really know how to address it, I think, in an open, emotionally mature way. Kaya and then Micah.
Yeah, I feel like, as you said, like Barbados is really conservative and it's always don't have sex. I've seen, but regardless, people are gonna have sex. I promise that people are still gonna have sex, regardless of how much you push the abstinence narrative. And I think it's better to go about it with education rather than you completely ignoring it or just speaking about pregnancy in a sex ed class that you're just learning about pregnancy, and then sometimes sexually transmitted diseases and infections, and not actually educating about what can happen, like the emotional trauma that can happen, like certain precautions that you can take. It's not really going into that, because a lot of older people especially think that, but if you speak about sex, you're encouraging it, but it's not encouraging, it's education.
Micah?
Yeah, two things overall. In regards to what Kaya said, it is gonna continue to happen, regardless of if you do it, you got life in prison. People are gonna do it either ways, right? Because you have to think about it realistically. As long as a male sees a female, he's gonna go, "Oh, hello," right? So it's always gonna happen. And in regards to what you said, we have to, you know, try and get it out there more, try and get out the dangers of it, try and get out why it may be good at that moment, but then what can happen after it, right? Because speaking from experience, I had no idea that existed till like 12. So personally, I think you should get it out there from a young age, but give them a warning and say, you know what, don't go looking for it, keep it here and stuff like that. So you just have to find a way to ease it onto people. Because what I find when people talk about it, it's not exactly comforting, because, you know, it's something that you don't really expect to be talking about with your friends, you know? Like, for example, anytime my boys talk about that, is like, all right, yeah, switch. What happened in the football or something? We would rather talk about anything but that, you know? Because it's a topic that not a lot of people feel comfortable about, knowing that, you know, it's a thing, it's dangerous. I can actually get sick if I mess up, right?
Right.
So you have to.
Yeah, I think, well, I think it's interesting because it's at a particular age where maybe within a group of friends, some people have done it and are ready for it, and then some people haven't done it or aren't ready for it. And so I think as you're going through teenage years, it's like people are kind of at different stages of comfort. And I think like it's important that like it's not seen as this, you know, awful thing. You know, it's something that's completely natural, you know, and I think it's the role of sex education and sexual, you know, and reproductive health resources to make sure that like you're going from being young, you know, children into being adults, and that's a part of adult life. And so it's important that you have everything available in terms of like, you know, emotional knowledge about things like consent and whatnot, as well as like physical resources like testing and clinics and contraception and stuff, so that like it is a safe and enjoyable experience and not something that's seen as like, you know, the devil's work or like, you know, a death sentence. It's, you know, I think a really interesting terrain because the teenage years are so ambiguous and like, you know, stages of emotional development are so different. And yeah, I think especially with boys, I think they have a particular pressure to start becoming sexual. Both girls and boys, but I think the idea of manhood is something very interesting that I think definitely needs to be talked about more as boys grow up and turn into men. I think the toxicity within manhood or ideas of manhood is definitely something that should be addressed in these conversations. Imani?
I think like what you're mentioning about that emotional maturity and the development process, and also that thing of how it is such an ambiguous time and you can have people that you're really good friends with and everyone's at such different stages in, you know, that area of their lives. And I think the idea that sex is kind of a qualifier of your emotional development and your maturity is a kind of tricky and like dangerous idea that we have of, you know, it being the thing that validifies the relationship. Like if you do this, then yeah, it's a real thing, or that you're a man or you're a woman, and that timeline and the pressure that is put on you to be meeting certain, or what you perceive as like, you know, the right time to be doing this stuff, even if you personally aren't feeling comfortable, just to be hitting those marks and feeling like you're not getting left behind. And I feel like that makes people find themselves in a lot of situations they aren't ready for because of that pressure to not get left behind by the pack. And if everyone around you is doing it, you don't want to feel like a little kid among, you know, your friends are becoming adults, but you're still just like a kid, and that kind of weird misconception that you have to have sex to be an adult or to be in a serious relationship. So I think kind of not tying it to our ideas of maturity and becoming adults and manhood and womanhood would be really helpful to kind of stop that people doing it before you're ready.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, I think, is emphasizing that you literally have your whole life to be an adult. Like I can promise you, it'll just keep going. Like I think putting a value on appreciating, you know, what growing up is, and that it's such a short period of time in the context of like your whole lifetime, that enjoying like the simplicity of like being a teenager is important, you know, and you don't have to rush into being an adult because there's a whole, you know, lifetime of adulthood that you got to deal with, you know. Yeah, Mike.
Right. So in regards to what you said, and what Imani said as well too, truth be told, I have a acquaintance now, but friend then. So we were talking, not just me and him, like a whole group of my homeboys and him. So we were talking, and then he dropped the line, you know, I did it, and everybody just, it was like an awkward silence. It's like it what, like homework it, or, and it's like people knew what he meant, but we didn't want to admit that we knew what he meant, because like it's like, yo, you's only 13, bro. Why are you furthermore, what are you even telling me? Right? Because I'm one person that does not like to hear anything about you. You do you. Yeah, right. So I don't I didn't really like it because first off, it was us and then first farmers, and it's like, you know, save that for later if at all, right? Because what he said spiraled into a whole conversation. And then I told him, you have to think about what you just said. Because you said that maybe jokingly, but then guess what? The first farmers are going to hear it, and the first farmers are going to spread it like a disease. They're going to say it in their class, and that class is going to tell the next class, and it's going to go on to the whole school knows this 13-year-old guy in second farm just did this. And it's like, you have, just because it's a word, right, or a sentence, it shows you the impact of words on human mind and how much words can influence somebody, especially when it comes to that. Because he can say that, he will say that probably like, or maybe retract it saying, "Oh, joking, right? It was a joke." And then 2 weeks later, you hearing a first former say, "Yo, I do it." It's like, huh? What do you mean you did it? Where you heard that from? And then they will go and drop the line. I heard it from XYZ. And it's like,
Mhm.
because then they're going to do it. Then in one way or another, God forbid, if something was to go wrong, their parents are going to go, "How did this happen? What did you do?" Then, uh-oh, it comes straight back to him. He's out of school or furthermore jail in a sense, right?
Mhm.
So you have to think about what it is you're talking about.
Mhm.
I don't eat anything about me, and when it comes to that, because it's a delicate topic. Because you may say it jokingly, and somebody that actually did it and knows what it's like and knows the risk of it and still
Mhm.
did it is gonna take that as an offense because they went through it. They knew what happened. They still do it, right? They still know
Mhm.
what can happen, and they're gonna take that as an insult because you're saying this as a joke. Like if it's something like, and that's something that changed your life. Because like, what if the older person did it and their father at 15 and the mother at 16 or something like that,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
a pretty delicate topic. And
Yeah.
speaking personally, I am not exactly, I'm gonna admit this now, I'm not exactly the most comfortable talking about that. Because, like, truth be told, I like almost anything, right? Ranging from sports, MMA, anything. I listen. I will even sit down and watch Barbie with my with my younger cousin, right? And I just, when it comes to that, I cringe and I cramp. If it's one thing about me that I can admit, I just shut down when it comes to that because it's like I have to play a significant role in that process,
You
right?
feel like dragged into it, you mean?
Yeah, because as a male, if you do something wrong or do what she wants to do, but you know it's wrong, and then whoops,
Mhm.
you are a father at 13 or 14 or 12 for
Mhm.
that matter.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, it's all gonna come back on you negatively. So
Yeah.
we had to like keep trying to out that fire fast because it started to spread. Because the first woman looked up at him and said, "Well, how was it?" And it's like, no, don't ask, because then you're gonna take that, you're
Mhm.
gonna run with it, you're gonna add to that, and then make him look even worse. And it's gonna come on us too, because we're just bystanders, right?
Mhm.
We're trying, because that time we're gonna we're gonna just be, telling you stop. But then in the authorities' eyes or someone else of authority, for example, like principal or someone in the school,
Mhm.
is gonna hear it plus the extra add-on, and it's gonna be like, okay, you were there, you edge him on, you come to. So
Right.
it's a matter of picking what you say, when you say it, and how you say it too.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, I think, to get some insight into those like group settings as guys, right? Because I think you can start to normalize guys having a say that goes against like the norm or what's expected, and like value things that contribute to your personality that's not getting action, or girls, because there's a lot to be said there that becomes like the obsession of guys as they're growing up, and there's so much more that contributes to your personhood growing up. And yeah, I think saying like putting boundaries on your on these sort of situations is very important. So Haley and then Ella.
Like, I get what Michael is saying. Like, it is an uncomfortable conversation to have because I feel like society has really normalized sex as just like something to do without attachment, or like, and the thing is, like, realistically, I don't think you can be that intimate with a person and not feel something afterwards. Like, even if you just found them attractive and yeah, basically do it and it like if even if you just found them attractive, y'all haven't really spoken before, that sort of thing. I don't think you can be that close to a person and not feel something. So like the fact that, it's like it's weird, or you're deemed weird if you don't want to speak about your sex life with other people,
Mhm.
or like, people are having conversations about this in group settings, and they're asking you questions, and it's just like, oh well, like that's kind of weird, like why don't you want to tell us? But really truly, it is no one's business. Like, it's a very personal thing that I think has been made public.
Mhm.
And that's what comes with a lot of pressure, because realistically, no, like unless you tell someone, no one really should be asking, because it is a very private thing that a
Mhm.
lot of people are trying to make like just whatever.
Kind of like drama, like just to get into the details. Ella?
What Micah and Haley were saying, like I feel like it's really sad how it happens, because I saw this video on TikTok like a couple weeks ago, and there were these like, it was like 20 guys, one guy walking out of the room and then the girl behind him, and like she looked so not embarrassed but just not even ashamed either, but it was just really sad to see it. And then you talk about how like the guys feel like they have this obligation to tell everybody that they did it. When you think about it, like I don't know, I mean, any girl that has told me that personally, but I feel like when somebody says it, if a girl says it, she'll probably just tell it to her close best friend. It's something that they want to keep intimate between the two of them. And then it's kind of sad if you think about it, that the boys feel like they have to boast about doing it, which is something that's so intimate between the boy and the other girl. And it kind of breaks trust, going back to either the toxicity, and then you have this kind of influence of the media, which I think plays a big role in the boys' confidence and influence on stuff like that.
Absolutely. I want to keep talking, but I'm going to go on to the next point because I think we're a little bit over time and I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time. The other points were just points and not so much questions, but the topic of cheating and then the topic of gaslighting, and maybe we can like wrap those two into like one kind of, sort of brief discussion, like how cheating is also quite normalized and glamorized, and like how to deal with that.
The reason I would say I think cheating is like glamorized or normalized is for the fact, I guess, on the girl's perspective. For some girls, they see it as, okay, he cheated on me, but at least he knows where home is, so he came back to me, and it's like, okay, well, the other girl, she's not that important. There's a one hit wonder, I guess. He don't really want you. He came back home to me, and I guess that is something that's quite portrayed a lot and accepted, and makes it seem accepted even more.
Mm-hmm. Micah?
I am speaking from more of a personal but not personal side at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because truth about me, I have saved more than I have been in. So
You've
yeah,
saved more relationships than you've been in.
yeah, I've saved at least not that's pointless. I don't even remember at this point. But from the faithful guys and girls that I know, they were heartbroken. And like what Jamila said, because truth be told, I know some crackheads. I know people that have one or two and three and four, five different guys and girls in the phone. I know a guy who had six girlfriends at one point. Um, and I know many people who've gotten exposed on Valentine's Day. Like when they're posting that, when one girl posts that use yours and six others post it, it's gonna be like, wait, that's the same guy that, oh you, huh? So then there's always the body that screenshots and sings, and that is gonna get forwarded, and you're gonna get exposed in some form or fashion, right? And I guess it's normalized, especially around men, more so the unfaithful ones, excluding me. Um, especially because it's like something like, yeah, poetry, put you on side, on hold, on to next one, right? It's kind of like a checklist, or I heard a friend of mine say they treat them like a hit list, right? You do her, yank, do you, put you on hold for now, do you, done with you, block, ghost, everything. And it's more of a show and a performance to show that, like, yeah, I could ghost, I could cheat with the best of them, right? I could do this, I could do that. You're basically saying that you could do anything but be faithful, and you're kind of saying that you're greedy too, and not satisfied with who you have.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause cheating is basically finding using a slinkier way out of a obligation or relationship in this case, and it makes no sense to me personally, especially how I was raised, saying you know men shouldn't be cheating on their wife for just because she may not want to have children at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or and I grew up hearing this saying, "Don't be a Jezebel" or something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like a 50-50. Like you females cheat, all of us cheat in some form or fashion. Not all of us, but more males and females cheat. We're humans. It's a mistake that happens, and the cool thing about it in some cases is that it exposes those who are actually dirty and would do anything to get out, but shows you that there's actually people there willing and waiting to try with you and wants to further something with you instead of just ended it for no reason for something temporary.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting distinction with maybe like kinds of cheating, where there's cheating where it clearly has everything to do with the ego and, like you said, this hit list kind of mentality that is very much, I think, tied into the toxic masculinity kind of thing. And then there's cheating where it is maybe a mistake or a bad, bad moves. So Caitlin and then Haley.
Right. So in terms of gaslighting, I think that something that's often be said is, if you don't me, I can kill myself, or I can do this, or I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so surprised because when I was in second form, I used to see a lot of my friends in situations like that. And I think it has to do something with the household as well, because at 13, why are you saying things like that, or where you get that from? And cheating, I think people often think that cheating is only physically, like you having sex with somebody else, but there's also emotional cheating where you could be talking to somebody, like falling in love with somebody else while you're in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And people often overlook that because they only see it as something physical. So at a young age, somebody could be your boyfriend and they're talking to somebody else, but you don't think that's cheating because it's not something physical when it actually is. So I guess, yeah, that could also go into like toxicity as well.
Mm-hmm. Haley?
Like all of the other toxic things that were mentioned before, it just seems like there's a culture that supports it. I know that, like, the first guy that I ever like talked to like that, like you like bad sort of thing, I was friends with him for months before, didn't really know a whole lot about him. I became friends with some of his friends as well, like when we started like talking, right? And I remember after a few months, I realized this man had a whole girlfriend. No one said anything to me. No one. I had literally no idea. I remember vaguely hearing a name mentioned like when we were just friends and stuff. And I didn't pay any attention because I wasn't even looking at him like that. And I just forgot. And there I was. Literally. That was honestly like the most embarrassing situation in my life. Like looking back on it, it was very embarrassing, like all aspects of it. But the most embarrassing thing is that it took so much out of me to get over it. Like it took like, and it's just like I'm literally like 13, 14. Why do I care this much? But I cared a lot because I thought this person genuinely liked me. And it took a lot of like a lot of talking to myself and telling myself that it wasn't me, it wasn't my fault, like to get over it. And I think that people like underestimate how much that affects you, like how much time that takes to get over. It's like cheating is so normalized, but it isn't even, how can that even be fun for you, you know? Like it seemed like an ego thing, like a rite of passage, but cheating can't even be fun. Like you can't possibly be enjoying yourself looking over your shoulder every minute, like hiding things. That must be exhausting, but it's like, oh, like I'm the man sort of thing. So it's like, I don't know, people really celebrate it, and it can't even be enjoyable to me, at least. Like it cannot be enjoyable.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm sorry that that happened. And I think yeah, you really can't underestimate, because like it's not even, you almost like feel bad for not knowing, but if you're like, being very purposefully misled, then there's no way, to have known. And yeah, I think it is interesting, like how do people get off on these sort of stressful situations? And maybe it has to do with, I don't know, distraction, like, not wanting to deal with themselves as a person. And so they just make their life filled with all of these, I don't know. It is an interesting question. Maybe we could find some honest cheater and interview them, because I would like to know too. Destiny?
Yeah, I agree with Micah said that they're they know how to lie and cover their tracks. I had an experience, and I wouldn't say we weren't officially together, but we were like seriously talking. You get what I mean? And almost, I can't remember how long it was, but we were talking every day, every night, phone calls late, we were practically in a relationship. And then a day when my girlfriend came to me, he was like, XYZ got a girlfriend. I was like, you kidding me, right? You got me lying. I don't believe you. And he was like, no, he does. He does. Because they're like, me and this guy is friends, and he's friends with XYZ. So I was like, nah, he got me lying to me. He got me playing with tricks on me. And XYZ had the audacity to block me off his status. So this was around, I can't remember when it was, but he had posted him and his girlfriend, and I think it was Woman Crush Wednesday, and he was like, "Oh, Woman Crush Wednesday." He blocked me from the status, so I couldn't see it. But my good friend, she saw it and she screenshot it and sent it to me. Caitlin saw it and screenshot it and sent it to me. And I was like, wait a minute, this cannot be happening to me. Of all people, me, why do I deserve this? So I was like, I had to go to him and was like, hi, good evening. He was like, hi, how you doing? I was like, I good. And I sent him a picture, and he was like, I didn't know he was gonna be serious. I was like, you blocked me off your status. You know what you were doing. So so yes, I agree with Micah said that they know how to cover their tracks. And he was kind of trying to gaslight me to thinking that I was kind of crazy for how I was acting. But no, I know I acted correctly.
Yeah, I would bat that. Caitlin?
I think too is that I feel like a lot of people like got a backup plan in a sense. I don't know, like they always want somebody to be there so that if one thing doesn't work out, at least this body is here for me. That's what I find sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it makes it hard because, like you say, like you don't deserve this. Like, you would ask, like, why would I deserve this? And like, you have an attachment to this person or to this, this element in your life, and then it's like it seems to be like a farce, and it makes it very, I think, difficult. And I think your self-worth definitely takes a toll. But I think, like I said, I hope that nowadays people kind of get more of like an independent sense of self, that when these things do happen, like Micah, you mentioned, you feel knocked down, but like that you have that sort of strength to like get up and like a sense of, being a strong individual, I guess, not that you should be put through a situation like that to know that you're a strong individual, but, it's not the end of the world. So yeah, I don't, like I said, I'm being mindful of time. So as much as I'd like to keep going, it's not a question that was on the agenda, but it was brought up, like, are there, and this is a question for me as well, like, because Dance4Life, we focus our main priority is obviously the sexual health education, and things like gender-based violence and stuff like that. But in terms of like these like relationship crises or these problematic aspects of romantic relationships or that sort of thing, are there resources that you guys find are available either in person or online to seek out advice for these sorts of things, or not at all?
The best friend who always has a heartbreak.
Yeah, I was basically gonna say what Micah said. Like, I feel like there's no set place to go. I mean, on TikTok, there are like these accounts who like talk about that kind of stuff a lot, and I guess that could be a resource. But most of the time, for me at least, it's just talking to other people that are around me rather than going to a specific source. Because to my knowledge, there's not a source to go to for those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
True, like the education isn't really anywhere, like nobody talks to you about that. And I think that gosh, I completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, the education isn't there. Oh, I was saying that I think that a lot of the sources on like social media would more tell you that the best revenge is to get back at them or do the same thing or make them feel the same way. But that really isn't like it might feel good in the moment, but it really doesn't, it isn't productive. And at the end of the day, you're still gonna have to deal with like the trauma that is left for you. So I can't really think anything that I've learned, I've either learned from my close friends or I had to figure out myself.
Micah?
Yeah, in regards to what you said and what Haley said, it shows you as well what is prioritized in society nowadays, right? Because you could go to any website, right? For all you know, you could type in how to get over a sexual relationship or something like that.com, and it will come up and you will have help in regards to that. But then if you were to say how to work through getting cheated on, there's not that much, because you could see it, right? Because doing sex is higher up the food chain in a sense than getting cheated on. Because in society's books or in society's eyes, it's like that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. The world is gonna end, right? So it's always about that first and many little things after. Getting cheated on isn't really like one that if sexual relation was to go out the window, that would be a big crisis in society. Is more sexual relation, child support, or anything under that, right? Having a child, raising a child as a teen parenting and stuff like that. Before you can have a million and one things before you probably get to cheating. Last time I checked.
Right.
So it shows you as well that there's not that much of a care towards cheating, probably because maybe like it's something that happens every day or something that maybe normalized in society as normal, and you have to work that out as yourself by yourself instead of like with sexual relation. No, that's two people, but those two people are more entangled in their eyes than if you were cheated on, right? So it's also how it's prioritized outside of your relationship or whatever you may be in.
Right. And I think that ties into kind of what we were saying at the beginning with teen relationships, just in general, not seen as like as real relationships and just more of a childish type of thing, whereas it does have a big impact. And I think when it does go wrong, I think someone mentioned in the chat that like it makes it difficult in future relationships. It makes you kind of overthinking or suspicious and complicated. I could say for myself, I've had that experience. And so it's definitely something that shouldn't be shouldn't be overlooked in the way it is. Haley?
I think that we should like focus more on like self-empowerment, like from younger, like even like primary school, because the thing is that when people get into first relationships, which I'm realizing a lot of the time seem to be very toxic,
Mhm.
it really depends on their self-worth and like how they're treated in their house and how their friends treat them as well to
Mhm.
determine whether they're gonna get out of it. Because
Mhm.
for some people, that might be like the only learning experience they need to know what to avoid.
Mhm.
But then for some people, depending on how they were raised and what kind of example of a relationship they had, they might deem that the norm and only they might now seek out things like this then. And like a lot of people just get stuck in like an endless cycle of bad relationships
Mhm.
because no one has ever like taught them how to value their worth without someone else doing it for them.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it is true that in a lot of cases, experience is a good teacher, or you may have a good set of friends that could, support you, but sometimes people don't have a good circle of friends, or people feel like, yeah, experience can really result in more of like a cycle of just repeating experiences over and over again. And so that being said, like it could be maybe something that we work on throughout the term to sort of maybe brainstorm how could we fill gaps in these sort of things. Like what would that look like? Would it look like posters in school? Would it look like, us like maybe a video, I don't know, or like a counselor for every form or something like this? I think that was something we brought up in the previous meeting last term about domestic violence or gender-based violence, something like that. So that will be not for tonight at 7:30, but maybe in future conversations. So does anyone have anything to say or to add or to ask any other questions before we wrap up? All right, sweet. Okay, so well, for now, that's all. Thank you guys for all your valuable insights and inputs and for your questions. And yeah, hopefully this is just the beginning of these conversations. Okay.